UFC Fight Night Orlando. We got my arch nemesis, Kevin Holland, throwing down with the legend, Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson, one of the greatest MMA strikers to have ever done it. Obviously, as of recently, he's been on a little bit of a tough skid. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. But if you take a look into the level of competition that he's losing against, some of the more stiff competition towards the top of the welterweight division, and stylistically, Holland is a little bit of a different opponent here. So, keep in mind, Thompson is up there in age. This is going to be the deciding factor if Stephen Thompson's still going to be hanging around towards the top of the welterweight division, or if he's going to plummet off the cliff into the depths of retirement. So I'm excited for this fight card. We have 15 fights booked for UFC Orlando. The teller might be making a special appearance to the venue. I think there's some excellent spots to make some money on this card. So you guys know what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be talking about all the betting lines in regards to these fights. We'll be talking about how these fighters match up. We'll be talking about where the value is. We'll have timestamps for every single fight on the card. Hit that like button. It's highly appreciated. Let's jump into the show.
It's another day, left jab, right jab, this is MMA. Mixed martial arts, quick body parts, undefeated when I pick 'em. Who the champ, who the victim, looking in my crystal ball, I predict the winner. Never stop fighting, if you lose, keep your chin up. Know how the game go, I'm a smart fella. Welcome to the show, this the MMA fortune teller.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
What is up, you guys? UFC Fight Night Orlando. Hopefully all you guys had a great Thanksgiving. As you could see, the teller is looking a little chunky. I've been throwing the calories back. Hello?
Hey, this is Ellie with Smart Alarm.
Fuck you. What is up, you guys? UFC Orlando. Here we go. Hopefully all you guys had an amazing Thanksgiving. As you guys can tell, the teller was eating right. I was just looking at my face here on the computer screen, and I could tell that the calories are all over me. I see it in the cheeks, and it's all good though. It's the holiday season. We're hitting the end of the year. Still do your thing, stay hitting the gym up and whatnot, but it's okay to eat good towards the end of the year. There's nothing wrong with that. We can start to pick things up in January. So we got 15 fights to talk about. UFC Fight Night Orlando, headlined by Stephen Thompson and Kevin Holland. Other than that, we got RDA taking on Brian Barberena. We got my boy Matt Schnell taking on Matheus Nicolai. That's a big fight for Matt Schnell, coming off one of the greatest fights of all time. If he can go out there and take out Matheus, Schnell's really going to be buzzing, but of course he is going to that fight as a pretty hefty underdog. Tai Tuivasa versus Sergei Pavlovich, one of the bigger name fights on the fight card. Hermansson versus Dolidze, Anders versus Daukaus, two guys we've had on the show. Guida versus Holtzman, a little bit of a throwback fight there. I mean, there's some fun fights throughout this card. Michael Johnson versus Marc Diakiese, some good matchmaking there. Really all throughout this card, even though it doesn't have real star power, excellent matchmaking. I look at the Darren Elkins versus Jonathan Pearce fight. That's another good one there. So, all right. So as you guys know, we do all the recaps as their own episodes. So we have the last fight card. The recap video is posted here on the channel. If you guys want to see how I did there, it was another profitable event. We went 2 for 2. Feel good about that. And I think that's about it. Catch me on all my social media. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. And with that, we're jumping into the first fight of the card. Kicking the card off, we got a strawweight match of Yazmin Jauregui taking on Istela Nunes. Sorry if I'm butchering Yazmin's last name there. And I want to throw this out to you guys real quick. I put a lot of time breaking down tape on these fighters, as you guys know. The majority of times when I'm breaking down tape, I have the fights muted for the vast majority of times when I'm watching the fight. So sometimes even though I'm being introduced to a new fighter, as we were with Yazmin when she made her debut recently. When I was watching the tape on her then, not really listening to the commentating. Even when I'm running back her UFC debut, I'm not really listening to the commentating, so I'm not really hearing her name replayed over and over again. Of course, when I'm listening to interviews or whatnot, the name will start to stick, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm a guy that really likes to crunch the tape. With some of these new fighters, I don't really get overly involved and making sure I pronounce the last name perfectly. I do apologize. I know it annoys some of you guys, but Yazmin taking on Istela Nunes. Istela Nunes, remember now, she was coming off a very long layoff before coming back or coming into the UFC, and she is now in a 2-fight losing skid since coming back into the sport of MMA. She was on like I said, a long hiatus before coming into that fight. She had a years of break. She was fighting over in ONE FC. She was involved in some big time fights over there. She fought Andrea Lee. Istela Nunes, more of a striking based fighter, doing her thing over at American Top Team, which is always a good thing. Like I said, a striking first type of fighter, which in this spot here, this is going to help her out because her opponent is definitely a striking based fighter as well. Yazmin has some beautiful boxing. She's a very, very confident striker. When you see her in the cage, I mean, she's very confident. She's looking to steamroll her opponent. She's pressing forward. She's very technical. And I was very impressed with her UFC debut where she prevailed and continued the undefeated streak where she took out Yazmin Lucindo, the underrated and tough Brazilian fighter. You keep an eye on Lucindo as well. I believe that was her UFC debut. Lucindo looked good in that fight. And although that she was bringing it to Yazmin as well, you can just tell that both fighters are promising. And of course, Yazmin did prevail. But the point I want to make is that even at points where Yazmin got hit with some shots or there were some moments in the fight where Lucindo was looking good, you could tell that it was just a decently high level of fight for the division. So you don't really put Yazmin under the fire for anything that went wrong in that fight. And of course, Yazmin had her moments where she looked very good. She's coming into this fight as a big favorite. We're going to get to the betting line in a second. Yazmin, only 23 years old. You could pull up fight tape of her where she's 19 years old and her striking is still very, very technical and crisp. So understand now, as she hits 24 years old, this isn't some fighter that's just still learning that aspect of the fight game. She's going to be very, very comfortable on the feet. I'm going to be taking Yazmin to get the better of Istela Nunes on the feet. But I want to tell you guys something as we get to the betting line. I think that the line may be a little steep. Keep in mind that Istela Nunes is an inch taller, has a 2-inch reach advantage. She's a little bit more of the naturally large fighter there. But I think that when people look at Nunes, they look at the long layoff that she came off of. She got steamrolled by Ariane Cornellosi. She got finished there late in that fight. I believe it was in the third round, I believe. She lost to Sam Hughes, got outstruck there, but that fight was decently close. Okay. Nunes had a long layoff. She's starting to get her groove back. I think she'll be a little bit more comfortable here as she steps into the cage. But I think that the line, as we're going to pull it up, let's see here. As you take a look at the line here on Bovada.lv, you see Yazmin's at minus 350 with the comeback on Istela Nunes at plus 260. I think that doesn't really. I think when people are thinking about this fight, they're not really understanding that this fight is probably going to play out on the feet. I feel pretty confident about that. I think this fight's going to play out in the feet. It's going to be a striking war, which plays into Estela's strength, so she'll be able to hang around a little bit more so. I do have some question marks about Estela's takedown defense at times and in her ground game. I think that this is going to be a striking war, and sometimes in regards to women's MMA and the lighter weight classes especially, the fights play out a little bit closer. I could see a little bit of tit for tat going on here. And when you're taking a minus 350 line, you want to be a little bit careful there. But that being said, Yazmin's good. Her striking's very good. It's crisp. I'm not necessarily crazy, but the minus 350 line, I'm going to edge and maybe more value towards Istela at plus 260. But she's got to show us something here, though, too. She loses this fight. It's the last we see of her in the UFC. And I think that there's a lot more to be seen from Yazmin. Francis Marshall taking on Marcelo Rojo, the Argentinian. Rojo, who does have his back against the wall going into this fight. This is a must-win for him, in my opinion. Marshall making his UFC debut, coming off a victory on Dana White's Contender Series, which that fight took place about 3 months ago against Connor Matthews. If you remember that fight, that was the second the second episode of the season. Both fighters there were 5-0, I believe, going into that fight. Two undefeated fighters that are kind of green, or were kind of green. Francis Marshall prevailed, used his grappling to get the job done there. Won a unanimous decision. Only 23 years old is Marshall. Rojo, on the other hand, is 34 years old. He's only won one of his last 4 fights. As I said, his back's against the wall here. Marcelo Rojo is a good striker. He has some serious power. If you take a look at his losses to Kyler Phillips, was submitted there. Lost to Charles Jourdain, a decent fighter there. Excuse me. So, yeah, those were his 2 UFC fights. So he has lost 3 of his last 4 in general, but has lost both of his 2 UFC fights. Rojo, 34 years old. He's going to have 24 professional fights compared to Marshall's 6 professional fights. I think that Rojo may have a little bit of an edge here on the feet. I think he's going to be a little bit more comfortable in the striking department. Francis Marshall has some good pop on his shots. He has some good power, but he's definitely vulnerable to being tagged there. He needs to refine his striking defense, and he needs to refine his striking overall, his offense and defense. He's learning. He's young, and don't be shocked if it costs him. Maybe not necessarily in this spot, but in the near future, because he's still a very green fighter. And I think that the fact that he's fighting in the UFC, he has a lot of talent, and he has a lot of abilities, and he might really thrive in the years to come, but I could see him running into some hiccups. I'm not sure if Rojo is going to be the guy to do it, but if he does do it, I think it's going to be on the feet. I think Rojo has the potential to tag him with the big shot and hurt him. In Francis's fight against Carter Matthews, he ate some big shots on the feet, but he also delivered some big shots back. So he's willing to eat some shots, give some shots back. He's tough. But you guys know how it goes, man. Sometimes those types of fighters, these grappling fighters that are athletes and that are tough, they want to sit and slug it out a little bit. And, you see them getting clipped and countered at times. Don't be shocked if something like that happens. Marshall's going to be an inch taller. He's going to have an inch reach advantage. He's a very physically fit fighter. He has some good grappling. I could see Francis Marshall getting this fight down to the mat and pulling off a submission, and that's what I most likely see happening here. We talked about 2 different ways this fight can go, and which ways those ways favor each fighter. I think that Rojo can hang around on the feet and can possibly get the better there, but I'm not 100% about that. But I do feel pretty damn confident that Francis Marshall will get the better of the grappling. I am going to be taking Francis Marshall to get the job done here. I think he solidifies some takedowns. He's young. I think the youth will help him out here, and that's the way I'm going to be going here. We're going to take a look at the betting line. Francis Marshall. He's going to be the favorite going into this fight, and Francis Marshall right now is a -185 on Bovada.lv with the comeback on Marcelo Rojo at +150. This fight card, we have 15 fights to talk about. There's a lot of tricky lines here. There's a lot of fights that I'm really on the fence with which way I see the value more so going. In this spot right here, I'm on the fence. I maybe more so have this fight capped on Marshall at a -170. So in that case, I'm going to say that the value is on Rojo at a +150 line. It's not majorly off, but at the same time, like I said, there's an opportunity for Rojo to do some damage on the feet. He has a lot more experience. He's extremely hungry. It's not like he's an old man, even though his age is up there. He's not like he's a very old man. What do we say? He's 34 years old. Still has a little bit left in the tank. He comes in physically fit as well. Let's see how this fight goes, but give me Francis Marshall to get the job done. Getting some takedowns, solidifying some takedowns, getting side control, raining down some damage here and there, and possibly pulling off some type of choke in the second round. Natan Levy taking on Genaro Valdéz. Genaro Valdéz coming off a tough loss against Matt Frevola. What a war that was. Matt Frevola's been on an absolute tear, and that was one of his big wins there against Valdéz. If you guys remember that fight, Matt Frevola clipped Valdéz early in the fight. Valdéz was out on his feet. He showed the heart that he had in that fight, though, because he took a lot of damage. A lot of other fighters would have been finished much earlier in that fight. But you also have to take note the damage that he took in that fight. He took some serious damage. You got to wonder, how is he rested up? How's the brain rested up and all that? Natan Levy, he can get the legs up there. He can throw some head kicks. And if Genaro's slipping, he can definitely get tagged with the head kick that will rock him up. So you take note of that. Natan Levy, that this is a fighter that's pretty well-rounded at this point in time. And when you take a look at Levy, like I said, he has the kicking game going, throw some nasty body kicks. He'll throw the left kick in a nasty way to the midsection. He's shown that he's working on his grappling as well. He's a legit martial artist. I mean, like I said, he's a well-rounded fighter. Genaro, more of a hard-nosed, tough type of fighter, has some good power in his hands. We saw him get that knockout on Dana White's Contender Series against Patrick White, where he was able to get the opportunity to fight in the UFC after that fight. He's 30 years old. All right, so this is some young fighter. I mean, he has 11 pro fights, but he's 30 years old. He's in his physical prime right now. Back up against the wall, per se, or Natan Levy has now, he's won 2 of his 3 fights with the UFC brass. Obviously, he's 1-1 in the UFC, but the Dana White's Contenders Series fight he had as well. Natan Levy, I think he's a little bit more comfortable here going into this fight. I think that his mental will be a little bit more at peace going into this fight. He's starting to really feel confident in himself, where I feel like Valdéz has to have some question marks after taking the damage that he just took against Frivola. I'm going to be going with Levy. I also pointed out the fact of how well-rounded Levy is, so I wouldn't be shocked if maybe we see Levy sneak a takedown here or there, or in some scramble positions, we see Levy prevail on top. He's a cerebral fighter as well, has a high fighter IQ. He may be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well, I believe. He has a couple different black belts, in traditional martial arts. So he's a well-rounded guy. Give me Natan Levy to get the job done. Although, let's get to this betting line. Natan Levy at -185 with Genaro at +150. Another one of those types of lines. Genaro Valdéz has shown to have good power in his hands. We've seen some of Natan Levy's fights play out closely. We've seen that. I mean, if you take a look at the Rafa Garcia fight, that was a fight that played out very closely. He didn't get the job done there. The Mike Breeden fight actually played out a lot closer than a lot of people had it. That was an official play of mine. I had an official play, and Natan Levy came through for me. That fight played out a lot closer than it probably should have against a guy like Mike Breeden. So did Natan Levy's stock really go up that much after that victory? I could see a guy like Genaro Valdéz keeping this fight close, and I could see this being a closely contested matchup, and I wouldn't be crazy about chalking up a -185 line on Natan Levy. But that being said, I got to point the direction towards Levy getting the job done. Like I said, the more well-rounded fighter. The question marks with Valdéz. Keep an eye on Valdéz, though, and let's see if he could land a big shot that really shakes things up. Otherwise, I kind of see Levy outpointing him and mixing things up enough to get the job done there. One of the better fights on the card, we got Tracy Cortez taking on Amanda Ribas. I was a little surprised to see this fight so low down on the totem pole of this card, so early on. I thought this would be more towards the main card. Tracy Cortez and Amanda Ribas, both lookers, both talented fighters, both fighters that have a lot of promise. I know Ribas has been dropping some fights here and there. Tracy Cortez has been undefeated as far as fighting under the UFC banner and Dana White's Contender Series and all that. So she has been 5-0 since the Dana White's Contender Series victory over Maria Agapova. Coming off a victory against Melissa Gatto, where she really used her wrestling. We know that she has very above average wrestling for the division. She can give some gross troubles there. But Amanda Ribas is a specialist on the ground, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. We know her father is a Jiu-Jitsu legend and whatnot. So I think that if Cortez is just going to try to rush into these takedowns, I definitely think that Ribas can give her some trouble down there. I wouldn't be surprised if in fact Ribas pulls some type of submission off down on the mat. You need to definitely take note of that. Let's take a quick look here. The one loss that Tracy Cortez had was in her pro debut, where she was caught with the guillotine. Since then, she's refined things. She's been looking good. 28 years old. We know that she is the partner of Brian Ortega. So obviously, her jiu-jitsu is being worked on a daily basis. I mean, when your significant other is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist like Ortega, and you know that they're doing some type of training together here and there, I mean, that's going to definitely carry some weight. So that's going to help Cortez out here. Hopefully she'll be able to avoid that sub. If she avoids the sub, she could definitely reign some control time down on the mat and maybe steal some rounds there. But let's talk about how the striking goes between these fighters. Amanda Ribas, a very feisty and aggressive fighter on the feet. Now, she's not the most technically sound. Sometimes she's a little sloppy. We've seen her get countered, and we've seen her take some damage on the feet by getting a little bit too aggressive, right? I mean, of course, the fight that comes to mind is the knockout loss that she took from Marina Rodriguez. She bounced back with the victory over Verna Jandiroba. That was more of a jiu-jitsu match, right? Jandiroba and Ribas, two high-level jiu-jitsu players. They kind of nullified themselves there. And then in her last fight, she had a very closely contested matchup against Caitlin Chookagian. Chookagian was an official play of mine. It was a close fight. I thought Chookagian deserved to get the job done there. But Ribas did show to be tough in that spot. So who do I got here? How do I see this fight taking place? I think that Amanda Ribas will actually get the better on the feet. I think that Cortez has some good power. She's good with her boxing, but I could see Ribas being just a little bit more, like I said, feisty and active. I think she'll have a little bit more volume, and she'll be she'll be on the front foot. As Cortez tries to sneak in those takedowns, like I said, she might be in danger there as well. So overall, I got to go with Amanda Ribas to get the job done here. Amanda Ribas has had some major success in the state of Florida. One of her biggest victories of her career was against Mackenzie Dern, where she ran circles around her. That was in Tampa, I believe. So she's comfortable fighting in her home state. She does live in South Florida, I believe, at this time. My buddy bumped into her at the local grocery store. I remember that a while ago. He gave me a call. He's like, I just saw Amanda Ribas. So it won't be a crazy trip for Ribas to make it to fight night. Ribas will have a half-inch reach advantage. Nothing really going on there. 2 inches shorter than Cortez. Nothing crazy going on with the frames here. Give me Amanda Ribas to get the job done. I think she just has more options, while Cortez will have to rely heavily on the wrestling and the defensive jiu-jitsu of her to get the job done. So let's take a look at this betting line. Let's see what we're working with here. Tracy Cortez at even odds, and the comeback on Amanda Ribas at -120. Basically a pick'em line here. So obviously I'm liking the Ribas line a little bit more so at -120. I mean, it's pick your poison with these types of lines, and I edge Ribas. So that's where I see the value more so. And that should be a good one. Darren Frankenstein Elkins taking on Jonathan JSP Pearce. Darren Elkins still hanging around, 38 and a half years old, coming off a victory, and he has won 3 of his last 4 fights. I don't know how he's doing it. Coming off the victory over Tristan Connolly, victories over Derek Minner and Eduardo Gagori. So not the highest level of competition on those victories. The loss to Cub Swanson, where he was styled on and finished. Other than that, his last loss was an official play of mine on Nate Landwehr 2.5 years ago. The thing with Darren Elkins is, you guys know, I say it time and time again, he's so damn stiff on the feet. If you're able to keep him off you and you're able to keep him at range, you can light him up and you can bloody him up. You could outpoint him. You could knock him out. You could do a lot of things. You could wobble him up. But if you are not up to par with your grappling and your distance management and your footwork, and you let him get a hold of you, then you let him push the pace on you, he will break you down, and he'll submit you, he'll ground and pound you, he'll outwork you, and those are some of his strengths. I mean, we've heard some of the stories that have been told about Darren Elkins. Uriah Faber has told a lot of stories about what Elkins has done in the gym. The guy is an absolute legend to an extent. To a degree, right? He's a legend in his own right. I've been watching him from way back in the day. I believe even since the WEC days. I believe he came from the WEC. And in regards to this fight here, I think that JSP is going to be up to par in the grappling field. You guys know I'm a big fan of JSP's pace and grappling, so I think he's going to be up to par there as far as keeping Elkins off of him. And I think that JSP is the more promising. He's the better striker. I think he could land some big shots. I think he could do enough to bloody Elkins up and land those big shots, similarly to what Nate Landwehr did in their matchup, which is why I am taking JSP to get the job done here. And I think that's how I see this fight going down. I hope that JSP doesn't try to push the wrestling. We know that he likes to do that. He really pushes a high pace with his wrestling. He's used to breaking guys in the cage. I don't think he needs to go that route. I think that he needs to use his wrestling from a defensive standpoint and use his boxing to tag up a guy like Elkins, who has very below average striking and very below average defensive movements. So I hope that that's the route that he goes. Maybe I'll shoot him a DM and let him know that. if he cares to hear it. I know he's cool. He does check the DMs and he'll hit you back and whatnot. He's a cool dude. You see him getting that working with Eryk Anders and Tracy Cortez, who are both on the fight card. Great to see some iron sharpening iron over here as they prepare for the same date. Give me JSP to get the job done. Let's take a look at this betting line, which you're going to see a high line. I'll let you guys know that right now. Jonathan Pearce is a -500. So obviously the masses are in agreement with what I'm saying. I think that everybody is kind of thinking the same thing I'm thinking here. I don't really think that people have much faith in Darren Elkins' his abilities to avoid that big shot on the feet. And they don't really see him breaking down a guy like JSP, who has proven to be an absolute grinder. Give me Jonathan Pearce to get the job done here via TKO in the first or second round. I love this matchup here. Michael Johnson taking on Marc Diakiese. I think this is a fun fight for MJ. I've always been a big fan of watching MJ. I got to bring up one of the stories. One of my good fight stories here. I know I used to talk about this a lot back in the day, but I haven't really brought it up in a while, so some of you new listeners might get a kick out of this. I'll make it quick, but I was there for Michael Johnson versus Nate Diaz live in Orlando. That was a giant fight card, too, if you guys remember. JDS versus Overeem. There was all types of fights on that card. I had Michael Johnson's brother. I believe that was the fight card anyways. I've been to a couple in Orlando, but that was that fight where Michael Johnson fought Nate Diaz, where Nate Diaz had the epic post-fight speech. If you guys go on YouTube, you can pull up this fight too. Michael Johnson's brother, who was sitting right behind me, I was chopping it up with him the whole time. In fact, I'm sorry, he was sitting in front of me. I was chopping it up with him for a while. Crazy dude. He ended up running down the stairs, brawling it out with a bunch of these Nate Diaz fans, a lot of them. I'm talking about one guy went and fought like 10 guys. They were talking shit the whole fight. Once the decision was made, once Buffer hopped on the mic and said, and the winner is, and they went with Nate Diaz, Michael Johnson's brother said, if my brother don't get the nod, I'm running down there and I'm fucking these dudes up. It's exactly what he did. I would love to know if his brother's going to be out there. In fact, I do have his IG, and I've messaged him a couple times. We've talked a little bit back and forth. It's funny, I found him through MJ's Instagram. I was just checking on him how he went, because he got cuffed. He got arrested. He spent the night in jail. But I wonder if he'll be out there causing some chaos. Michael Johnson is definitely looking to be causing some chaos out there against Marc Diakiese. I think I see this fight playing out like this. Listen, Michael Johnson's coming off a loss, but really a lot of people had him beating Jamie Mullarkey. Jamie Mullarkey right now is a solid fighter, a solid striker. I think that Michael Johnson will get the better of the striking against Marc Diakiese right now. Marc Diakiese has some good power, but Johnson will be more fluid, in my opinion, more fluid, more unorthodox with the southpaw stance. I think he'll give Diakiese some problems with the striking. But Diakiese will probably look to take the safe route here and use his wrestling and whatnot, try to take Johnson down, which is essentially what he did in both of his last two fights, where he prevailed against Damir Hasnovic and Borishev, Slavoclaus. Now, Michael Johnson should be a little bit more up to par there. I mean, we know that he trains with some of the best of them. You see him putting in work over here with Gilbert Burns. We know the work he puts in over at Sanford MMA, and talking about his coach, Greg Jones, I believe he is the wrestling coach over at Sanford. I mean, we know that he's always working on all aspects of his game. And the thing is, though, we've seen Michael Johnson really drop the ball many of times over the past however many years, and it's kind of hard to back him. I kind of want to pick him here to win this fight because of how good he looked in that Mullarkey fight. And before that, he had the knockout over Alan Patrick, which, you know, Patrick is up there in age, and that wasn't the biggest victory, but he needed something like that to kind of get him back in rhythm. And I thought that he did enough in the Mullarkey fight too to be on a 2-fight winning streak. Is he going to be able to keep Diakiese off him enough to showcase his striking? And then even in the striking department, I mean, is Diakiese going to be able to hang with him as well? We've seen Johnson kind of tagged up a little bit there, and Johnson's obviously willing to take one to give one. This fight can go a couple different ways. I want to pick Michael Johnson. I think that Johnson's very live to get the job done here, but something tells me, and I think it probably tells a lot of you guys, that a guy like Diakiese, who's been coming in with the cerebral tactics that he has as of recently, is going to prevail one way or another against Michael Johnson. As Michael Johnson gets hectic and has those hiccups mentally inside the cage, a guy like Diakiese, who's been on the grind just trying to get W's, is probably going to prevail here. So sorry guys, I can't give you the pick of Michael Johnson, which I was very close to doing here. We got to go with Diakiese here. I think that Diakiese will get some takedowns throughout this fight, and Johnson will be frustrated. His brother will be frustrated probably at the event, and probably will start attacking some English Diakiese fans if he can find them and get his hands on them. So Diakiese is a minus 290 favorite. I definitely think the value is more so towards the plus 230 line of Michael Johnson, in my opinion. I'm not crazy about that minus 290 line on Diakiese. Diakiese was able to stylistically take advantage of his last two opponents, but before that, losses to Rafael Alves. I took Alves. That was an official play of mine, an underdog official play where Alves got that guillotine choke against him. And before that, he loses to Fiziev. I don't necessarily see Michael Johnson pulling off a sub here. I think that obviously Johnson will be coming with the heavy hands, looking to land some stuff. He'll be active and try to outpoint Diakiese or whatnot. Give me Marc Diakiese to win the fight, but I'm rooting for Michael Johnson, and I hope that he can implement his game plan. We got a throwback matchup here. Clay Guida taking on Scott Holtzman. Scott Holtzman hasn't been in the cage for about a year and 7 months. Even before that, he had almost about another year layoff before that fight going into that one. But fighting Beneil Dariush and Mateusz Gamrot, high-level opponents. Before that, victories over Jim Miller, which that victory holds up pretty well when you take a look at it now. And Dong Hyung Ma. And before that, a loss to Nick Lentz. Clay Guida has been doing the loss thing for the last 5 fights. Lost to Bobby Green, victory over Michael Johnson, lost to Mark Madsen via split decision. That was a close one. Victory over Leonardo Santos. That was the one where he took the early onslaught of Santos, and then Santos gassed himself out. And then in his last fight, he got caught with the knee bar submission by Puelles. Clay Guida, one of the coolest guys you'll ever meet. I met him at a Bare Knuckle FC event in Miami. Was really, really cool. Chopped it up with him for a minute. Ended up chilling with all his boys. And me and my cousin ended up going to the bar with him. Got some shots, got some drinks. It was really, really cool just chopping it up with him. Went back. We're hanging out with him and his boys, just cracking jokes, watching the fights. He is as down to earth of a guy as you'll ever meet. All right. So it's funny because I don't want to go into it all, but I've had some different views on Clay Guida in the past, and it was kind of based on just the timing of a situation the first time I met Guida. But Guida is without a doubt a really awesome dude. Scott Holtzman, I've always been a big fan of Holtzman's. I've always felt like he was an underrated fighter. Comes in severely fit. This guy comes in phenomenal shape. He has good power. He's up there in age, but I still expect him to be very explosive, very, very muscular. And again, if you take a look at the losses that he just took, now in retrospect, you understand it was against high-level competition. The Nick Lentz, not the best loss, but Scott Holtzman he's done his thing throughout the years. He's 39 years old now, but guess what? He's fighting a guy that's about to be 41, so it's not going to be the biggest issue. I'm going Scott Holtzman here. I think that when I think of the best that I've seen from Scott Holtzman, in my opinion, it was probably better than the best I've seen of Clay Guida. Now, Clay Guida was always a very entertaining fighter. He's been in some wars, and the fight with him and Diego Sanchez and whatnot. I mean, he showcased himself throughout the years as well. But Holtzman, in my opinion, had some legitimate potential, and I feel like he just didn't really live up to it. If Holtzman shows up and shows glimpses of anything of that type of being that old type of fighter, I think it's better than what we're going to see from Guida, and especially from what we've seen from Guida as of recently. He snuck off some victories here and there based on some situations, right? We talked about how Santos gassed himself out, fighting a guy like Michael Johnson, who we just talked about as well. Holtzman, different type of fighter. Give me Holtzman here to get the job done. I would love to see Holtzman land that big right hand like we've seen from him in the past. I just talked Guida up and said how great of a guy he is, and then I say when I see him get knocked out, it's nothing personal. I've been a fan of Holtzman's from back in the day, and I like the fact he's making a return after a long layoff, and this is probably the last time he's going to do it. I don't know. Maybe if he wins, he gets another fight, but if he loses, he's definitely done. And give me Scott Holtzman here, minus 152. I'll aim more towards the value on a Scott Holtzman at minus 152, but there are some major question marks in regards to this fight. Both ways. These guys are up there in age, and it's a tricky fight, but give me Scott. And I see more value on the minus 152 line. Angela Hill taking on Emily Ducote. Emily, the new girl on the block in regards to the UFC strawweight division. She's only has one fight under her belt. That was a victory over Jessica Penne, but it was a very impressive victory, and it was a great way to burst on the UFC scene, in my opinion. Absolute domination over the longtime veteran Jessica Penne. Now she has another opportunity to take out a big name or a respected name in women's mixed martial arts against Angela Hill here. Emily Ducote, 12-6 as a pro. 6 losses. Quite a good amount of losses if you think about it for a girl who's just entering the UFC and has all this hype. If you take a little bit of a deeper dive into those losses, 2 of those losses against McFarlane, a very talented fighter, champion over in Bellator, or former champion. I forget if she's still the title holder right now. The Hawaiian, talented fighter. I believe one of those fights may have been a split. I forget. Another loss that she had was against Kanako Murata. She's 1-1 in the UFC. She's a talented fighter as well. And then she also had a couple split decision losses out of those 6 with other fighters. So just understand, I think that she just had a little bit of some unfortunate chain of events, but I think that she's starting to really get things going right now, and she's a promising fighter. Angela Hill, the same thing can be said about Angela Hill. She had a lot of split decisions go the opposite way, and her record could definitely look much better than it does. Let's not overlook Angela Hill. Angela Hill is up there in age, but still going out there and getting the job done. She's coming off a big victory over a very respected fighter in Lupita Garines, the younger fighter who has a lot of promise. But Angela Hill went out there and got the job done. I still want to make note. You got to realize Angela Hill is about to be 38 years old in a couple weeks. All right, and I don't think you could just completely overlook that. I know she's still going out there looking to be in phenomenal shape, and she's still doing her thing, but age has to catch up with every fighter over time, and you gotta like seeing that 28-year-old mark next to Ducote's name, about to be 29. You gotta love seeing that much better than that age you see in Hill. And just the performance that Ducote just put out there was good. Ducote has some serious power on the feet, carries some serious power. She's technically sound. I expect Ducote to land the harder shots here. Angela Hill will be using that footwork. She'll be trying to land and whatnot. She'll keep the fight close, but I expect Ducote to be the fighter that has the more fight-impacting shots as she tries to pressure Hill. She's going to have to close off the cage and really find her spots to land if she's going to get the job done here. Otherwise, Hill will be running around the cage doing her little dance moves and tag her up from the outside and win a decision. I'm liking Emily Ducote. I think that she will close the cage off. I wouldn't be surprised if Ducote sneaks a takedown in here or there. We've seen Angela Hill taken down at times throughout her career, and it's cost her in some fights. If you want to run the tape back on her recent fight with Tisha Torres, kind of cost her in that fight there. I could see Ducote possibly implementing some of those tactics. Give me Emily Ducote. Give me the younger and up-and-coming fighter here who was shown to have some promise. Let's take a look at the betting line. Emily Ducote is going to be a very slight favorite, a -130 favorite over Angela Hill, who's a +110. I find more value on the -130 line. I know Angela Hill is a fighter that consistently comes in as an underdog, and there's value next to her name, and she's proven that. But this fight is almost a pick'em, essentially. Again, the slight lean towards Ducote, but at this type of line, I'm going to say I favor it more towards Ducote. In a week's time when they face off in Orlando, I could possibly see Ducote being the kryptonite of Angela Hills there. Or at the very least, it plays out closely, but I still see Ducote just edging it with the heavier landed shots in the fight. Niko, the hybrid Price, taking on Philip Will Smith Rowe. Philip Rowe, 2-fight winning streak under his belt right now, 2 finishes. But if you take a look at the level of opponents, they certainly don't look as good these days. Jason Witt and Orion Kosi, 2 guys that are definitely lacking defensively. But Philip Rowe, not to take anything away from him, he went out there and he implemented his boxing. I think his boxing is very promising. You got to love the reach that he brings into the division. 80.5-inch reach for the welterweight division. That's crazy, and he's a solid striker. I think Philip Rowe is a promising fighter. Niko Price also has a wild frame for the division. He is he's an unorthodox type of fighter. I've seen him land some wild knockouts. I've been there live. So we know that also Niko Price has performed in the state of Florida. We talked about another fighter doing that earlier. The knockout that Niko Price had over James Vick, the upkick knockout, that fight took place in Tampa. I was there for that event, and the arena was going wild when he landed that knockout. Since then, losses to Vicente Luque, the no contest with Cerrone, and then the loss to Michel Pereira, and finally got the victory over Alex Oliveira, which even that victory doesn't look the best. He should have went in there and finished a guy like Oliveira, who makes mistakes in the cage and gives his opponents those types of opportunities. Although I've been a big fan of Niko Price's, we talked about some of the wild knockouts that he's had. He's had multiple wild knockouts like that. I love to watch the guy perform, but I do believe that he hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype that he's had in the past. He's a fan-friendly type of fighter, but I don't really see him really causing any ripples towards the top of this division. Where a guy like Philip Rowe, yeah, he still needs to prove a lot more, but he is the type of fighter that I think can potentially take it a little bit further. I think that he's a fighter that can land some nice knockouts on the feet against a lot of fighters in this division. Now he needs to go out there and prove that. Like I said, the guys that he's been doing it against as of now, that's not enough. If he goes out there and hurts Niko Price and lands some big shots and potentially gets a stoppage in this fight, that's saying something to me, and that's what I'm looking for. Again, you see how he's very, very comfortable on the feet with the striking. He's very silky smooth with the striking. And I'm taking Philly fresh here. I'm taking Phil Rowe to get the job done. I think that he'll just land the cleaner shots here. Not sure if he's going to be putting Niko Price away, but that's the way I'm going here. And, I don't know the whole background with these two guys, but two guys that train in the state of Florida. I think they've trained with around the similar area. I'm sure that these guys know a lot about each other through the grapevine. Phil Rowe training in Orlando at Fusion Excel. Niko Price putting in a lot of time at American Top Team Cape Coral. I know he's bounced around or whatever. I know these guys have definitely brushed shoulders with similar fighters, and they probably know a lot about each other. I'm kind of curious what the background story is upon these guys in that regards. I haven't dug too deep on that, but this is a fight that's a big fight for both men, and I'm taking Philip Rowe to get the job done. Let's go take a look at the betting line here. Phil Rowe he's an underdog here. He's a plus 115 dog with the comeback on Niko Price at minus 140. I think this has a little bit to do with the fact that Philip Rowe hasn't went out there and defeated a not a big name opponent, but even just a somewhat legitimate opponent. Like I said, those two guys, they're not really there. So Philip Rowe, people want to see more from him. Niko Price, we know he's a battle-tested fighter. He's been in there with big names, and he could do a little bit of it all too. He's tough, and I can understand why Niko Price is coming in as a slight favorite, as he has the more recognizable name and whatnot. But give me Philip Rowe, and there's more value in my mind on a plus 115 line on Philip Rowe. I think he outpoints Niko Price. Not sure if he gets the knockout. Probably lean more towards the decision, but I think that Rowe will land some clean shots and get the job done there. So let's see how that fight takes place. Eryk Anders taking on Kyle Daukaus. Two men I've had the pleasure to chat it up with on MMA Live Discussion back in the day. Two guys that were very down-to-earth and cool individuals. Eryk Anders coming off a tough loss, a split decision loss over Jun Young Park. Once again, showing that he's a dog. That's a great description of who Eryk Anders is. He's an absolute dog when he's in there. He has good power. He marches forward. He might be outmatched technically at times, like we saw him against Nunes. Nunes has some of the best jiu-jitsu in the division, got caught with that armbar. We may have seen Anders outpointed at times, but when it comes to just being a dog, marching forward, eating shots, trying to land those power shots, Anders is about as good as it gets. Kyle Daukaus coming off a big-time loss. He went into that fight against Roman Dolidze as a significant favorite. And fell short, got clipped, and got put out. So you got to wonder where his mental's at right now. You got to wonder where his physical's at as far as taking a shot goes. Eryk Anders will throw some big shots at him. He'll throw the kitchen sink at him, and there's some real potential that Anders clips him with the shot and puts him out. As you see, me and Anders chopping it up. Anders, sitting in the guest bedroom, twirling his toes, looking up at the fan, talking with the teller, and got to give him respect for taking the time to come out. And Daukaus doing the same thing. Look at them, head against the the bed frame. I mean, these guys really have a lot more similarities than a lot of you guys think. You know, they chatted up with the teller, twinkling, twirling their toes with their head up against the bed frame. So, listen, if Daukaus can get his shit together, I think that Daukaus obviously has some legitimate potential to go out here, outpoint Anders. Even maybe if this fight goes down to the mat, he showcases his jiu-jitsu. Not as confident in that because I think that Anders has some good defensive wrestling. And I think Daukaus might have a tough time getting the fight down to the mat. But I could see Daukaus mixing things up and outpointing Anders, maybe similarly to what we saw in the Christoph Jocko fight, where Anders was outpointed from the outside. But I'll tell you what, man, Anders has been hungry. He's been coming forward, and he's been looking to land some big shots, even more so recently. And Daukaus is coming off a knockout loss. Give me the dog here. I think that Anders can clip Daukaus with something. Maybe he throws a knee to the midsection as he's dropping elbows and just throwing the kitchen sink, like I said, at Daukaus. Because if you don't realize, I mean, Anders isn't just a guy that headhunts with his fists. He does mix things up, throws some heavy kicks as well. He's a true athlete. We know that he's a former Alabama linebacker. You know, that obviously says a lot about his athletic abilities. And Daukaus right now, his backup is against the fence, and he's got a dog coming right at him. Give me the dog here and Eryk Anders, which you're going to see a line next to Anders' name of, I believe he's right around a plus 170, and that is what he is, a plus 170 with the comeback on Daukaus at minus 210. I see more value on Eryk Anders right now at plus 170. And again, even though he's coming off a loss, that was a fight where he actually performed pretty good. Some people thought he almost did enough to get the job done. He kept it close against a talented fighter. Daukaus right now coming off a tough knockout loss where he collapsed in there against Dolidze. Anders has the same type of power as the Dolidze, if not more so. Daukaus does not want to let Anders clip him or touch him up with some shots. Speaking of Roman Dolidze, taking on a big name in the division, Jack Hermansson. This is a giant fight for Roman Dolidze. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, and out of those 3 fights, had knockouts in 2 of the last 3. And within a 5-month time frame, knockout over Kyle Daukaus and then the knockout over Phil Hawes 3 weeks ago. So he has a lot of momentum right now. Taking this fight on short notice, great opportunity for him. Jack Hermansson coming off the victory against Chris Curtis. Before that, he had a loss to Sean Strickland. That was a close fight. Sean Strickland outpointed him on the feet. Then he had the victory over Edmund Shabazian, where he used his wrestling and whatnot to take that fight. That lost to Marvin Vettori before that, and then a victory over Kelvin Gastelum where he pulled off that beautiful heel hook. Jack Hermansson is a solid wrestler. We see that he has little tricks up his sleeve, like the heel hook and whatnot. His striking has been being worked on for a long time. Obviously, he's up there in age, so I mean, it obviously never grew to the level of some of the real high level strikers in the division. But you gotta appreciate the fact that he's worked on that, and we've seen him go out there and use his striking to get the job done. I mean, I was cage side for his victory over Jacare Souza. He was really able to outpoint Jacare on the feet. That was a big victory for him at the time. So, you know, we've seen him come to the state of Florida and prevail before, whatever that's worth. You know, we talked about the momentum that Roman's bringing into the cage here. Do understand, though, let's take a quick look here. Do understand that of those 2 knockout victories that he's just recently had, they were both in the first round. If Jack Hermansson's able to avoid that early knockout in the first round, I do believe that Roman Dolidze is not necessarily the same fighter that he is in the first round compared to the third round, in the second round. I have seen him kind of slow down in some fights. If you remember the Trevin Giles fight, he was breathing very heavy in that fight and kind of lost that fight by just not being in as good of shape as he should have been, in my opinion. If he was a little bit more in shape, he takes that fight. That was a fight where they were both digging very deep, and Giles dug deeper. Jack Hermansson, let me tell you what, Jack Hermansson can dig deep. He has great cardio, great will, great wrestling, and I could see Hermansson taking over this fight in the later rounds. All right, so, and Dolidze's polished up with his wrestling and all that too. He's a good fighter there, but I give the edge to Hermansson in those fields. With the conditioning, I give him the edge there. Hermansson needs to watch out for that big shot early. Dolidze is probably going to be feeling very confident in based on what he's been doing as of recently. And again, Dolidze was just in a fight a couple weeks ago, and of course he had a full training camp, but I don't know exactly what he was doing in that little break between finding out that he was going to have this fight. Is his conditioning ready to go. You know, these are certain question marks where Hermansson, and meanwhile Hermansson's been he's been set for this date for a while. So give me Jack Hermansson to get the job done. Let's go take a look at the line. I want to take Hermansson via decision. I think that he digs deep and takes 2 of the 3 rounds, possibly 3, but maybe 2 of the 3 rounds. And he's a minus 150 favorite with the comeback on Dolidze at plus 120. That line is fairly accurate. I'll lean more value towards Jack Hermansson at minus 150 because the line's not crazy. And I do like some of those variables that we just talked about that he brings in a matchup against Dolidze. And real quick, let's just take a look at this. Let's take a look at how many times Jack Hermansson's been knocked out in the UFC. So he is 10-5 in the UFC. 2 losses in Bellator way back in the day. But let's talk about the UFC fights here. 10-5 out of his losses, out of his 5 losses, he was knocked out 2 times. All right. So out of 15 fights, he was knocked out 2 times. That's a decent ratio, in my opinion. Got knocked out by Jared Cannonier. We know Cannonier possesses some serious power, and he was knocked out by Thiago Marreta Santos. All right, so those are some serious power punchers. All right, we're not going to hold him under the fire. It's not like Hermansson has shown to have major chin issues or nothing like that. I think he could hold up against Dolidze. Give me Jack Hermansson. Tai Tuivasa taking out Sergei Pavlovich. Tai Tuivasa bringing the Shoey to the state of Florida. Should be a great time with him over there at the event. Sergei Pavlovich coming off the biggest win of his career. Had that knockout victory over Derek Lewis. That was 3 months ago. Before that, knocking out Shamil Abdurakhimov, knocking out Maurice Green, knocking out Marcelo Gome. Sergei Pavlovich has some serious power. He's a little bit more technically sound than Tai Tuivasa, in my opinion. But Tai Tuivasa has also shown to have some major power, and he's more technically sound than people give him credit for, in my opinion. His physique and his wildness at times doesn't really give him those types of vibes. But listen, he landed some big shots against Cyril Gane in that fight. Eventually, yes, he was broken and he was finished in that fight. But Tai Tuivasa is a dog and can take a shot. And this fight is going to be a wild fight. Whoever lands that big shot, that fight impacting shot, is, in my opinion, going to be the fighter that kind of takes over this fight and kind of breaks the opponent. I think that both of these guys will eat a couple of shots to deliver some back. I just see this fight being a war on the feet. That's the route I'm going with this fight. I really think that this fight is a stand-up war. Sergei Pavlovich, like I said, to me is a little bit more technically sound, and right now is just kind of rolling. And I'll give you a heads up right now. I'm leaning towards Sergei Pavlovich's way in this fight, but I think that Tai Tuivasa is very live to pull this off. I mean, he's just such a dangerous fighter. I love the fact that Sergei Pavlovich, though, has a 9-inch reach advantage. That's serious. That's a big deal. If Pavlovich uses that reach advantage and strikes from the outside and really tries to find his distance with that big shot from the outside and doesn't get involved in a dogfight with Tai Tuivasa, I think it will carry major weight for him. I think that he's going to I think he should have broken down a lot of tape on the Cyril Gane versus Tai Tuivasa fight. He should be taking a lot of pages out of Cyril Gane's book. Now, I know Pavlovich isn't the same fighter as a Cyril Gane in regards to the kicks and all that, but Pavlovich can do a lot of good things with his hands and with the boxing, and I think that he can implement a lot of tactics that Gane did with his jab and striking from the outside to Tuivasa in that fashion. So those are things that you want to keep an eye out for. If he doesn't do that well and he lets Tai Tuivasa come on the inside, land big shots, it could be a tough day for Sergei Pavlovich. And I do want to note, Alistair Overeem had a knockout or a ground and pound finish. I believe he hurt Pavlovich on the feet also. That was 4 years ago, excuse me. All right. So before Pavlovich has been on this tear, he has been hurt in the cage. And of course, I mean, these are heavyweight fighters. It happens. There's a realistic possibility Tai Tuivasa lands a big shot, but I like Sergei Pavlovich here. Again, based on some of the things we talked about. Let's see here. So let's take a look at the Bovada line. We have Sergei Pavlovich as a minus 185, Tai Tuivasa a plus 148 underdog. Listen, when you got big boys like this throwing down on the feet, I don't really feel confident in a minus 185 line on Sergei. All right. So, and you guys know I had an official play on him against Derek Lewis. But although Sergei Pavlovich settled more towards that minus 185 up to minus 200 line, if you guys remember, up in that fight week, you were able to get Pavlovich more around a minus 130 line. All right, it was much lower early in the fight week, and I did capitalize on that. So, I mean, if you're looking at a minus 185 line here on Pavlovich, I'm not necessarily crazy about it myself, but I wouldn't be surprised at all, or I am expecting Pavlovich to kind of go in there and get the better of the striking. We'll see how that fight goes, but be careful with that line. Matheus Nicolau taking on Matt Danger Schnell. Matt Schnell, my boy. He's an awesome dude. You know, I had the pleasure to chat it up with him as well. Another fighter that's fighting in the card that I've had the pleasure to chat it up with. Matt Schnell is an awesome dude, man. He's always poking fun on IG with me, you know, comment on my posts and whatnot. He's just an awesome guy. He's a family guy, and he's a fighter that, I mean, it's hard not to root for him. Now, you know how it goes, man. I got to pick these fights, and at times, unfortunately, I have picked against him, and I picked against him in fights that he's proved me wrong in. And you take a look at his last fight against Sumadarji. I mean, Sue was a giant favorite going into that fight. Pretty much everybody was on Sue, but Matt Schnell showed to have the heart of a lion in that fight. I mean, that fight was one of the best fights that I've ever witnessed. The way it ended, I mean, that was one of the most iconic fights. If you remember that picture with Schnell sitting there with Sue out and all the blood everywhere. I mean, what an iconic victory. Matt Schnell is coming in with some real momentum here. He is 2-2 in his last 4 fights. A victory over Tyson Nam, a closely fought fight. Lost to Rogerio Bontorin and Brandon Royval. Before that, also a loss to Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja and Nicolau actually remind me a lot of each other. Underrated striking, jiu-jitsu, and all that. I should say underrated striking, but both fighters have very good striking, and sometimes people don't understand or realize to the level of how good their striking is. They're nasty strikers. Maybe Nicolau a little bit more of a jiu-jitsu based fighter. Pantoja can do that too, but you guys catch what I'm saying. Pantoja maybe a more dangerous striker. Listen, after I didn't pick Matt Schnell to take Sumadarji, you know, he like I said, he jabbed a little bit at me on Instagram, and I told him I ain't gonna pick against him in his next fight. So, you know, that was locked in before the opponent was even announced here. All right, so I'm rolling with my dog Matt Schnell, tagging him on IG for my official pick, and I'm hoping, you know, he comes out to this fight with all the dogness and up in his chest. You've seen those X-ray pictures going around on IG. He's got to have all those pitbull heads all up in his X-ray, bringing the dog out. He's going to have to dig deep in this fight, all right, because Nicolau he's a dangerous fighter, man. He's a talented fighter. And listen, Nicolau is a talented fighter, man. Coming off a beautiful victory over David Dvorak, Tim Elliott, Manel Kopp. That was a good fight. Fought that fight very intelligently. Got the split decision. And this was his second stint in the UFC. If you remember, he had an initial stint back in the day. Nicolau is a dangerous striker, good jiu-jitsu. Matt Schnell is going to have to be on his P's and Q's. Matt Schnell has good boxing, good power, beautiful jab. He could wrestle. He could do a little bit of everything. But Schnell cannot get stuck in the mud here. I mean, at times, there's been times in his career where he's been a little bit slow with his defensive movement at times, throwing shots, or he kind of froze up and he's been tagged up a little bit. Needs to be moving, needs to keep that head moving, dodging shots, and just mixing things up. And he has to go out there and have severe confidence. He needs to let Matheus know that he's going out there and he's getting the job done from the get-go and try to break Matheus. I think that's the way he's got to go. And maybe things are going to get sticky and crazy in there, and Schnell just prevails in a wild way. All right, so I'm taking my dog Matt Schnell to get the job done here. He's a big-time underdog. I told Matt I had him, so I'm a man of my word. But you guys know that Nicolau is a dangerous opponent. He's 18-2. And I'm sure I'll get some slack in IG for taking Matt Schnell here, because I'm sure pretty much everyone's going to be a Nicolau. But watch my boy Matt Schnell dig deep and get the job done. And fun fact, me and Matt Schnell at one point in time went to the same middle school, which we didn't even know until we were on the show chopping it up, which is pretty crazy. I believe we were there at the same time. I would have been in like 7th grade while he was in 6th or whatever it was. And it's funny. So big shout out to Matt Schnell. Really hoping he gets the job done here. RDA taking on Brian Barberena in the co-main event. Rafael Dos Anjos coming off a tough loss against Rafael Fiziev. We know how talented Fiziev is with the striking. RDA got caught. But before that, a beautiful performance against Moicano. No, Moicano took that fight on short notice, but what RDA was able to do in that fight, the pace he puts on, the way he changes levels and does his magic in the cage. It's very impressive. The victory he had over Paul Felder, same thing there, changing levels, just doing it all. The fact that was a split decision victory was a disgrace. The judge that gave the fight to Paul Felder, that was disgusting. If you guys remember that call there, RDA dominated that fight. Lost to Michael Chiesa and Leon Edwards before that. Now those fights were, I believe both those fights were up at the welterweight division. So he did go back, I believe the Paul Felder fight and the Moicano fight were in the lightweight division. I want to pull it up real quick because I know this fight is taking place in their welterweight division, but RDA has been kind of bouncing around with these weight classes. So this was a catch weight of 160. It was supposed to be at 155. The Paul Felder fight was at 155. Yeah, it was. So, RDA has had some trouble at the 170-pound weight class, but again, he's fighting guys that are some of the best welterweight fighters in the world. Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington. It's hard to really put him to the fire for those performances. I mean, Brian Barberena now, he's fighting him at the welterweight division. Brian Barberena is a step down. So although he hasn't had the best success in this division, I think that this is a little bit of a different situation. I kind of like the fact that he's not cutting the weight with him being 38 years old. I think that this is a good spot for him to come back to a welterweight matchup against a guy like Brian Barberena, get a victory over him. Like I said earlier, Rafael Dos Anjos is just cut from a different cloth. This guy is such a workhorse. Like when I think of fighters that are just absolute gladiators, and of course all UFC fighters are gladiators to an extent, the RDA is just a different type of dude, man. He's a different type of dude. I mean, he is the gladiator of the gladiators. This guy is just always on the grind, always working on his craft. I feel like from what I know from the guy, what I see, this guy just lives in the gym and is just pushing forward to become a champion nonstop. Of course, he is a former champ, but it's like he just wants to hold that gold again, and he won't stop until he does it. So Brian Barberena, sloppy on the feet, very tough, very fun to watch, a fan-friendly type of fighter, but definitely has holes in his game, and in my opinion has got away with some stuff as of recently. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights, but knocked out an aged Robbie Lawler, who we saw definitely took a step back. Defeated Matt Brown, which that fight could have went either way. I thought Brown should have got the nod in his hometown. It was basically a tit-for-tat, an extremely close matchup, in my opinion. Could have went anyway. I don't know how you don't give it to the legend in his hometown. Defeated Darian Weeks, who has shown time and time again he cannot get the job done in the cage. Anthony Ivy, cousins with Poison. A lot of people think that's the only reason why he got the opportunity to fight in the UFC. We know Poison, has a lot of connections. So, I mean, Anthony's not even around the way anymore. And then, lost to Jason Witt, right? I mean, that's not a good look now. Jason Witt was able to out-wrestle him. I think RDA will change levels. He'll outstrike Brian on the feet. He'll take him down. I think he'll do a little bit of everything. All right, so give me the legend, Rafael Dos Anjos, to get back in the win column here. And I'm excited to see him perform. Now, he's a big-time favorite. Look at this line here. He's a minus 500. We already talked about a line like this in the card. RDA, another minus 500 line, I believe, tied for the second biggest favorite on the card. I think he gets the job done. So, I mean, minus 500, maybe a little steep, but maybe not really. I don't know. I mean, maybe that line, accurate. It's going to be up there because Brian's going to be in trouble. Hey, real quick, if you're looking for a new sports book, don't be shy. Reach out to me. I'll send you my referral link. If you guys sign up through my referral link, you're going to get an added bonus into your account. And I'm also going to give you a free fight card for my official plays. You can use it for whatever fight card you want. It's a great offer. Bovada.lv, in my opinion, is the best sports book out there. So if you guys want to check them out, if you have any questions, reach out to me. All my information is listed below. You can shoot me a DM on Twitter, Instagram. You can email me, MMAfortuneteller@gmail.com. If you're interested, reach out to me. Stephen Thompson taking on Kevin Holland in the main event. Should be a fun one, depending. Stephen Thompson, almost 40 years old, so it really depends what version of Thompson we're going to get. And it also depends on what type of tactics we're going to see Kevin Holland try to implement in this fight. If Kevin Holland looks to go out there and strike it out with Thompson, I think this could be a fun fight. If Holland looks to take the similar tactical approach that we just saw Muhammad and Gilbert Burns take, I have a feeling that he could have some success there. And I know he's a completely different type of fighter than those two guys. I know those guys have better offensive wrestling. But I'll tell you what, man, from what I've been seeing from Thompson as of recently, with his footwork in the cage and how sluggish he's looked and the way he's been trapped against the cage and taken down. It's been pretty bad. So I'm not necessarily sure that a guy like Kevin Holland can't even get in on those hips and rip him down against the cage and get a takedown and work his underrated jiu-jitsu. Now, you guys know me and Kevin Holland. I've had our issues in the past, but, things are a little different right now, obviously, with him coming off that performance where he got dismantled by Khamzat. I'm not the type of guy that likes to go in on somebody when they're down. I'm more of the type of guy that likes to battle somebody when they're on the up and up and they're on their high horse, and I like to poke some fun, but I ain't going to really poke too much fun about his loss. It's just not my style. So I know Kevin Holland's hungry to get back in the win column here. We know that he's flirted with retirement and all that. Obviously, that was all bogus. He just was going through a little bit of a tough time, right? He was very upset with the way things turned out with the change of opponent and all that. You saw it in his eyes. He tried to duck Khamzat. You remember what? I'm not going to get into all that, but at the end of the day, he knew he had to take that fight. If he didn't take that fight and sabotage the card, he would forever be tarnished as far as all the love he gets from the fans. He would have lost all that, and he had to take that fight, and he knew he was done. So he comes off that loss. He's very motivated right now. I'm very interested to know what kind of tactical approach is he going to take. I'm really hoping that he's willing to strike it out with Thompson and try to prove something on the feet. If that's the case, I think that Thompson will outpoint him. Okay, now let's take a look. I mean, I know this has been a while ago, but what Thompson did to a Vicente Luque with the time was essentially primed Vicente Luque. If you remember how good he was, he's been looking sluggish as of recently, but he went out there, styled on a primed Luque, styled on Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal, a very underrated striker. But then you take a look at their last two losses, but again, they were via getting taken down and out-grappled. I don't know how this fight's going to play out, but if this fight is a striking matchup, give me Stephen Thompson here, and that's really the X factor. Also note, this is a welterweight match, so Kevin Holland cutting that weight down to the 170 mark. His last fight against he had the victory against Tim Means. The fight against Alex Oliveira, he dropped the first round, but then came back at the finish. Oof. All right, let's just cut to the chase. Listen, Kevin Holland will have a 6-inch reach advantage. He's more rangy and whatnot. I think Kevin Holland obviously can knock anybody out. He throws some real torque into his shots. Stephen Thompson, very poised on the feet. Cream of the crop as far as the striking abilities go, offensively, defensively. He needs to use his footwork and outpoint Holland from the outside. At the age that Thompson's at, wouldn't be surprised if he gets slept here. Would not be surprised if he gets slept. But if he's able to avoid that big shot and he's able to get his rhythm, I see him outpointing Holland. And I'm kind of leaning towards the way that I don't see Holland making this a boring fight using his wrestling. To me, he's just too much of a fan-pleasing type of fighter. So I'll give Holland credit there. And yeah, I'm going to take Stephen Thompson to win this fight. You guys know that's who I'm picking. I ain't picking big mouth Kevin Holland. I'm taking Stephen Thompson. But that's legitimate. I think that if this fight plays out the way it most likely should, Thompson's a tough outing for anybody in the feet, man. And I think that he'll let a lot of people remember that they kind of forgot what he can do there, styling guys like Jeff Neal, Vicente Luque. And that's only as of recently. I'm not even going to turn the clock all the way back, what he used to do in the past. But again, that X factor with the age too. Kevin Holland in the prime of his career, Stephen Thompson not in the prime of his career. We'll see how the fight takes place. Listen. All right, and that betting line right now, Stephen Thompson's a plus 110, Kevin Holland a minus 130, slight favorite. Take the dog there. Got to take my boy Stephen Thompson, all right? All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC Orlando. In retrospect, I wish I would have got this video out to you guys even a little bit earlier. Hasn't been anything too crazy going on with the card shakeup, and obviously I apologize if I sounded a little sluggish with this video. You guys know, like I said, it's the holidays. I had a rough day yesterday, sitting around eating, enjoying myself. And, it's the day after Thanksgiving as I'm filming this, and the holidays are in full effect. This week's been a long week for me. And I'm sorry I didn't get this video out to you guys earlier, but I hope that you guys know that I put a lot of time on the tape like always, and hopefully some of my knowledge will help you guys out there. Got to leave you guys with some parting words. They're not going to be the deepest. I got some good ones coming up in the future, but like I said, I know a lot of you guys are eating good, laying around, relaxing yourself throughout the end of this year. Just make sure you're balancing eating sweets and eating all that crappy food and pigging out make sure you're balancing a little bit of healthy food within the end of the month, or the end of the year. Make sure you're mixing in a little bit of healthy food and you're staying active. Go hit a jog. Go hit the gym up here and there. This way you feel good when you get those days off and you're sitting around eating and you're not feeling too fat and sluggish, because otherwise you'll get into a little bit too much of a funk, if you know what I mean. If you don't do anything all the way to the end of the year and you're sitting around the couch just pigging out and not doing nothing all the way to then, you're going to start to feel it and you want to enjoy yourself as much as you could. So sneak in a run, sneak in a workout here and there. You don't got to overdo it. We're at the finish line for 2022. But so enjoy it. You put the work in, but you got to get out there a little bit. You got to, even if it's twice a week or if it's just a couple healthy dinners a week, and then take advantage on that Friday night or that Christmas Eve or that, we had Thanksgiving, but you know what I'm saying. We have a big December coming up. And I hope you guys all have a blessed one. Stay safe out there.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.